Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. David Blackwood sat at the head of the conference table, his icy gaze sweeping over the tense faces of the executive board like a sharpened blade. The meeting room on the 50th floor of Blackwood Enterprises in New York was flooded with sunlight, but the atmosphere was heavy, as if a storm were brewing. Before him lay a stack of documents detailing a $300 million international partnership contract with Hantech Solutions, a South Korean tech conglomerate. This wasn't just a contract, it was a lifeline for Blackwood Enterprises, which was reeling after the failure of an artificial intelligence project that had sent the company's stock plummeting. "We have one shot," David said, his voice low and chilling. "Hantech doesn't play games. They want a stable, reliable partner. Fail, and Blackwood won't get a second chance." The CFO, Richard, adjusted his glasses, his voice trembling. "David, the issue is, Hantech insists on meeting your family. They're traditional. They believe a CEO with a stable personal life ensures a lasting partnership." David frowned, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table, each tap like a countdown. "Family? I don't have time for that." Richard swallowed hard, glancing at the others. "They're demanding you bring your wife to the meeting at Paradise Cove Resort this weekend. If you don't, they'll cancel the deal." The room fell silent. David clenched his fist, his piercing blue eyes flashing with irritation. Wife? He hadn't thought about marriage, not since his ex-girlfriend's betrayal 5 years ago left him with a scar that never healed. To David, love was a lavish joke. But this contract was the lifeblood of Blackwood Enterprises. He couldn't let the company collapse over a ridiculous demand. "Prepare the jet. I'm going to Paradise Cove," David said, standing and leaving the room, ignoring the anxious glances behind him. Paradise Cove Resort sat along the Malibu coast, where silver waves shimmered under the sunset. David, in a perfectly tailored black suit, strode into the main lobby, his cold demeanor causing the receptionists to bow their heads nervously. He had arrived early to prepare for the meeting with Mr. Park, Hantech's notoriously strict and traditional chairman. In David's mind, everything revolved around the contract, but the bring your wife requirement was a stumbling block, leaving him more unsettled than ever. As he stood in a corner of the lobby checking emails on his phone, a lively, high-pitched voice interrupted him. "Hey, miss, please check again. How could my room get mixed up with some big shots? I only booked the cheapest one, not a penthouse." David glanced over. A young woman in a cat-printed t-shirt, her hair messily tied up, stood at the reception desk, hands on her hips, arguing animatedly. Her large, sparkling eyes seemed to speak, and her mouth didn't stop delivering witty remarks. The woman, Sophie Bennett, was so dynamic that she had the receptionist and a few nearby guests chuckling. "Miss Bennett, there was a system error. Your room was reassigned to the presidential suite, but we'll fix it immediately," the receptionist stammered, clearly swept up in Sophie's energy. "Presidential suite? Oh my gosh, that sounds so fancy. But miss, I'm broke. Staying there would probably bankrupt me." Sophie laughed loudly, shrugging, then turned to an older man nearby and winked. "Do I look like a penthouse princess to you, sir?" The man burst out laughing, and the receptionist blushed, trying to maintain professionalism. David frowned and looked away. This woman was loud. He didn't have time for nonsense. But then, Mr. Park and Hantech's entourage appeared. Park, an older man with a sharp gaze, smiled politely at David. "Mr. Blackwood, a pleasure to meet you. I hear you're married. We look forward to meeting your wife at tonight's dinner," Park said, his tone laced with intent. David stiffened. "Tonight?" He hadn't figured out a solution. "Yes, of course," he replied calmly, though his mind was a tangled mess. He needed someone to play his wife, immediately. As Park walked away, David turned back to the lobby, his gaze inadvertently landing on Sophie, still chatting with the receptionist. She held up her phone, snapping a picture of the desk, muttering, "Gotta post this room mix-up drama for the world to see." Then she turned to an older woman nearby, flashing a bright smile. "Do I have TikTok star vibes? This drama's gonna go viral." The woman laughed heartily, and Sophie kept talking, turning the lobby corner into a mini-party. David paused. There was something about Sophie, Her quick wit, her ease with strangers, and the way she made people laugh. That sparked an idea. This loud woman seemed good at performing. If she agreed, she could help him get through the next 48 hours. David approached, his voice icy. "Who are you?" Sophie spun around, slightly startled, then squinted at him. "Oh, the presidential suite guy. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your room." She grinned, making a peace sign, then continued. "You look cool, though, like a CEO from a romance drama." David ignored the jest. "I have a proposition. You need money, don't you?" Sophie blinked, tilting her head. "Well, who doesn't? What's the deal? Hiring me to MC a wedding? I'm awesome at talking to strangers." She laughed, confidently patting her chest. David clenched his fist, suppressing his irritation. "I need you to pose as my wife for 48 hours. Tonight's dinner and a meeting tomorrow. I'll pay you $50,000. Sophie's jaw dropped, her eyes wide. 50,000? Are you serious? Just to play wife? No shady movie plot drama, right? Nothing shady, David replied. Just act properly, call me your husband, and convince everyone we're married. After 48 hours, you disappear with the money. Sophie nodded, rubbing her chin as if pondering. 50,000 could fix my leaky roof, buy a fancy coffee maker, and still leave enough for a trip. But you gotta promise not to get mad if I call you honey. It totally suits you, she smirked. David frowned but had no other options. Fine, call me that. Sophie, still beaming, nodded enthusiastically. Deal! But what's your name? I can't call my husband without knowing his name, right? David Blackwood, he said, extending his hand. Sophie grabbed it, shaking vigorously. Sophie Bennett, your future fake wife. So what's next? A ball gown? I've only got a floral dress from the market, but don't worry. I can make it haute couture with my vibe. She winked, striking a mock runway pose. David sighed, pulling out his phone to call his assistant. I'll have someone bring a dress and jewelry. You have 1 hour to prepare. Don't let me down. Sophie clapped, buzzing with excitement. No worries, Mr. Blackwood. With my charm, I'll make the whole world believe you're my husband. Get ready to blush. She laughed loudly, following a resort staff member to get ready. David stood there watching her go. For some reason, something about Sophie felt strange. A feeling he'd locked away long ago stirred faintly. The grand banquet hall of Paradise Cove Resort shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, the clinking of champagne glasses blending with polite chatter. David Blackwood stood in a corner, his impeccably tailored black tuxedo accentuating his tall, commanding presence. His sharp blue eyes scanned the crowd, calculating every gesture like a seasoned strategist. Tonight was the decisive moment. The $300 million contract with Hantech Solutions, a South Korean tech conglomerate, was the lifeline for Blackwood Enterprises, which was teetering after a failed project. But the absurd requirement to introduce a wife had thrust him into an unforeseen predicament. Beside him, Sophie Bennett, the woman hired to play his wife for the next 48 hours, was fidgeting with the straps of her emerald green evening gown, her radiant smile like sunshine in the tense atmosphere. All right, honey, ready to charm the socks off these big shots? Sophie whispered, nudging David's arm, her brown eyes twinkling with mischief. David clenched his jaw. Don't call me that, he snapped softly, his voice icy, and keep it down. Sophie rolled her eyes, unfazed. Oh, come on, sweetheart. If I don't sprinkle in some cute nicknames, who's going to believe we're madly in love? She winked, her loosely curled hair swaying as she tilted her head. David took a deep breath, suppressing his irritation. He'd agreed to let Sophie use those sappy nicknames, but hearing them firsthand still gave him goosebumps. Yet he couldn't deny this loud, quick-witted woman had a strange charisma. In just 1 hour, she transformed from a freelancer in a cat-printed t-shirt into an elegant lady, and her natural knack for connecting with strangers was the only reason he was betting on her. Before he could respond, Mr. Park, Hantech's chairman, approached with his entourage. The older man with a piercing gaze smiled politely, but David knew that smile concealed scrutiny. Mr. Blackwood, a pleasure to meet in person, Park said, his voice deep and measured. And this must be your wife. We've been eager to meet her. David nodded, his expression calm despite the chaos in his mind. Yes, this is Sophie, my wife. He glanced at Sophie, silently praying she wouldn't ruin everything. Sophie, as if born to shine, took David's hand and flashed a dazzling smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. Hello, Mr. Park. David's told me so much about you, but he kept saying you're all serious, like in the movies. I bet you're way more fun than that, right? Her voice was warm, laced with just enough wit to make Park smile, and those around them chuckle lightly. David stiffened, stunned that Sophie dared to speak so casually about Park, but to his surprise, Park's smile widened. You're quite charming, Sophie. I like this vibrancy. Tell me, how did you two meet? Sophie didn't miss a beat. She squeezed David's hand, pulling him closer with uncanny ease. Oh, it's a long story, but I'll keep it short. David was all ice cold, total CEO vibes, wouldn't even smile at me. But I kept calling him honey and dragged him to eat tacos and boom, he was smitten. She laughed, pinching David's arm under the table. Right, sweetheart. David felt his face flush, not from emotion, but from embarrassment. Still, he had to play along. Yeah, you're hard to resist, he said stiffly, forcing a smile he hoped didn't look too fake. The table erupted in laughter. Park raised his glass, his eyes gleaming. I like this couple. David, you're lucky to have such a wife. David glanced at Sophie, his expression complex. This woman, with her quick wit and explosive energy, had turned an awkward moment into a flawless performance. He didn't want to admit it, but he was genuinely impressed. Throughout the dinner, Sophie was a whirlwind of charm. She chatted effortlessly with Hantek's executives, spinning tales of a secret wedding on a Santa Barbara beach, or the time David sneakily booked a rooftop dinner to celebrate their anniversary. Each story was told with such sincerity and humor that even David, who knew it was all fake, almost believed her. Sophie even roped Mrs. Park, Park's wife, into a lively conversation about LA brunch spots, recommending a Silver Lake cafe with the best avocado toast on the planet, leaving Mrs. Park eagerly jotting down the address. David, despite his stoic demeanor, couldn't ignore how Sophie commanded the room. She called him honey and sweetheart, so naturally that he occasionally forgot this was all an act. But every time she whispered teasing remarks like, smile, iceberg, or we're busted, or pinched his arm under the table, he wanted to grind his teeth. This woman was a hurricane, and he wasn't sure whether to hate her or thank her. As the dinner ended, Park pulled David aside, his expression pleased. Your wife is a gem, Blackwood. She brings a warmth I truly value. I'm leaning towards signing the contract tomorrow after the final meeting. Bring her along, all right? David nodded, relief washing over him. Of course, sir. As Park walked away, David turned to Sophie, who was sipping champagne and chatting with a waiter about dessert. You did better than I expected, he said, his voice low. But no more improvising with Park. Sophie grinned, unbothered. Oh, come on, honey. I had him eating out of my hand. Admit it, I was the star tonight. She poked his chest, her smile radiant. What's next? More partying or bedtime? David glared, though his lips twitched upward despite himself. We're done. You sleep on the sofa. Sophie feigned a dramatic sigh, clutching her chest. Oh my gosh, what kind of husband banishes his wife to the sofa? Scandalous. She laughed loudly, darting toward the elevator, leaving David to follow, both annoyed and oddly lighter, a feeling he wasn't used to. The next morning, the final meeting took place in a luxurious conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. David presented the contract details with confidence and precision, his slides painting a perfect vision of collaboration between Blackwood Enterprises and Hantek. But Sophie, seated beside him in a sleek navy business dress, was the true star. She interjected with witty comments, like when David discussed market expansion. He's always talking about work, but I keep telling him, honey, don't forget to take me to Paris when you open that new branch. The room roared with laughter, and Park nodded, clearly swept up in her energy. David, though maintaining his serious facade, was secretly grateful for Sophie. Her presence softened his image, making him not just a cold CEO, but a man with a happy family, exactly what Hantek wanted. When the meeting ended, Park stood, shaking David's hand firmly. This contract is yours, Blackwood. I look forward to a long partnership. David exhaled, the weight of weeks lifting. He glanced at Sophie, who was clapping as if they'd just won an Oscar. For a moment he smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, before quickly hiding it. But the joy was short-lived. As they left the meeting room, a swarm of reporters and photographers ambushed them in the resort lobby. Cameras flashed relentlessly, one reporter shouting, "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you secretly got married? Who's this woman?" David froze, instinctively pulling Sophie behind him. But Sophie, with her lightning-fast instincts, stepped forward, grabbing David's hand and flashing a dazzling smile at the reporters. "Hey, everyone, chill out. I'm Sophie, David's wife. We're just trying to enjoy a little getaway, so let us grab some burgers, okay?" She winked, her friendly California vibe making the crowd chuckle, then tugged David away before they could ask more. The reporters kept snapping photos, but Sophie's ease, combined with the resort's security, helped them escape. In the elevator, David turned to her, his voice low. "What was that?" Sophie shrugged, still smiling. "Saving you from a media nightmare, that's all. See how slick I handled it? We're probably trending online now." She pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly. "Yup, here it is. Mystery bride of tech tycoon David Blackwood. Not bad for a day's work." David rubbed his temples. "This wasn't the plan." "Oh, relax, sweetheart. You got your contract. I got a bit of fame. Win-win." Sophie laughed, ignoring his glare. But when the elevator doors opened, David's assistant, Jenna, rushed up, her face pale. "David, it's bad. TMZ, Page 6, even TechCrunch. The internet's exploding with headlines about Cold CEO's secret marriage. What do we do?" David clenched his fist, feeling like he'd escaped one storm only to land in another. He glanced at Sophie, who was humming and saving a paparazzi photo to her phone. "Ooh, this one's nice. Look, honey, we're total red carpet material." He sighed, unsure whether to fire her or thank her for turning his world upside down. One thing was certain. This fake marriage charade had spiraled far beyond 48 hours, and David had no idea where it would lead. David Blackwood stood before the expansive window on the 50th floor of Blackwood Enterprises, his icy gaze fixed on the bustling Manhattan traffic below. The golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the skyscrapers, but his mind was shrouded in dark clouds. In just 48 hours, his perfect plan, a staged marriage to secure a $300 million contract with Hontech Solutions, had spiraled into a media storm. TMZ, Page 6, and TechCrunch blared headlines. "Cold CEO secretly married." Photos of him and Sophie Bennett, hand in hand at Paradise Cove Resort, flooded social media. Twitter exploded with hashtags #Blackwood Bride and #Tech Tycoon tied the knot. David clenched his fist, feeling the world's scrutiny bearing down. In the boardroom, the executive team argued heatedly. Richard, the CFO, adjusted his glasses, his voice tense. "David, this is bad. Shareholders are panicking, thinking you hid a marriage from them. Denying it now will make them see you as untrustworthy. The stock dropped 3% this morning." Jenna, David's assistant, placed a stack of tabloids on the table, their covers plastered with images of Sophie's radiant smile beside him. TMZ's calling her the mystery bride. Page 6 spun a tale about you two falling in love at an LA bar. "If we say it was fake, the media will paint you as a jerk who exploited an innocent girl." David rubbed his temples, trapped in a nightmare. He'd built Blackwood Enterprises on absolute control, but now everything was slipping away. "What do you expect me to do?" he snapped, his voice low and sharp. "Marry her for real?" Richard exchanged glances with the others. "Exactly, David. You need to legally marry Sophie Bennett for at least a year until the Hontech contract stabilizes and we restructure the company. A fake marriage will keep the media quiet and shareholders happy." David let out a dry laugh, but no one joined in. "Are you serious? I've known her for 48 hours. She's loud, chaotic, and calls me honey in front of partners." Jenna shrugged. "But she saved the contract, David. Sophie got Park to sign. If you deny this, the company collapses." David turned back to the window, feeling cornered. He didn't want marriage. Not with Sophie, not with anyone. After a betrayal 5 years ago, he'd sworn never to let his heart rely on another. But Blackwood Enterprises was his life. He had no choice. "Get her here," David said, his voice cold as ice. "I'll talk to her." Sophie Bennett sat in a cozy Brooklyn cafe, sipping a latte and scrolling through Instagram. Her follower count had skyrocketed since the Paradise Cove photos. She giggled at a comment. "Is she really Blackwood's wife? They look like a Hollywood couple." She saved a photo of herself and David, thinking that, fake or not, they looked pretty good together. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Hello, Sophie Bennett speaking," she answered, her voice as cheerful as if chatting with a friend. "Sophie, it's David Blackwood," a deep, serious voice replied. "I need to see you. Now at my office in Manhattan." Sophie raised an eyebrow, curiosity mixed with amusement. "Oh, honey, miss me already? All right, I'll come, but you owe me a better coffee than this place's." She laughed, hanging up before David could respond. An hour later, Sophie strolled into Blackwood Enterprises headquarters, wearing an oversized sweater and ripped jeans, a stark contrast to the sleek luxury of the space. She winked at the receptionist, chatting about the weather and making the young woman giggle before being escorted to the 50th floor. Entering David's office, she found him standing by the window, his posture rigid, his aura as cold as a statue. "Hey, sweetheart, fancy office. Do you ever jump on the conference table and sing karaoke?" Sophie said, flopping into a leather chair, legs crossed casually. David glared, ignoring her jest. "Sophie, we're in serious trouble. The media and shareholders think we're married. If we deny it, my company collapses. I need you to legally marry me for 1 year." Sophie blinked, her jaw dropping. "Marry for real? Are you kidding? You mean sign papers? Live together? Be actual husband and wife?" "No, no, no!" She waved her hands, jumping up. "I only agreed to fake it for 48 hours, okay? I love my freedom, eating tacos at 2 a.m., my cat dancing in my living room. I'm not chaining myself to a serious guy like you for a year." David frowned, stepping closer. "Sophie, I'll pay you $500,000 when it's over, plus all living expenses. You'll live with me, attend events, play the wife. After a year, we divorce, and you disappear." Sophie crossed her arms, shaking her head. "Nope, thanks. I love my life. I don't want to play Mrs. Blackwood for a year, even if the money's tempting. Find someone else." She turned, heading for the door. David clenched his fist, his voice lower. "Sophie, this company is my life. If the stock crashes, thousands of employees lose their jobs. You saved the Handtech contract. I need your help again." Sophie paused, looking back. She saw the desperation in David's eyes, but shook her head. "I'm sorry, David. I'm not the type for a gilded cage. I want freedom, to do what I love, help people my way. Find someone else. You'll be fine." David stepped forward, his voice almost pleading, a first for him. "Sophie, I'm not good at begging, but I'm begging you. 1 year, I'll do anything you want." Sophie raised an eyebrow, her eyes twinkling. "Anything?" She rubbed her chin, pretending to think. "Nope. Still no. I won't give up my freedom. Good luck, honey." She winked, leaving the office, leaving David fuming and helpless. David didn't give up. He hired a private investigation team to dig into Sophie's life. Within days, he received a report. Sophie Bennett, 25, freelance graphic designer, lived in a small Brooklyn apartment with a leaky roof. She regularly volunteered at a Queens orphanage, teaching free art classes for kids, even using her savings to buy them school supplies. Recently, the orphanage faced closure due to funding issues. David read the report, his expression darkening. Sophie wasn't just a loud, chaotic woman. She had a heart of gold. He devised a plan. The next day, David visited Sophie's favorite Brooklyn cafe. She was in a corner, sketching on her tablet, softly singing a pop song. Seeing David, she raised an eyebrow. "You again, sweetheart. You're persistent." David sat down, his voice serious. "Sophie, I know you love freedom, but if Blackwood Enterprises goes under, 5,000 employees lose their jobs. People with families, kids, mortgages. You've helped the Queens orphanage. You know what losing a job means to them." Sophie stopped sketching, looking at him. "You investigated me." "Yes," David admitted. I know you don't need money for yourself, but with $1 million, you could fix your apartment, save the orphanage, and do more. 1 year, Sophie. I'm begging you. Sophie fell silent, her eyes wavering. She thought of the kids at the orphanage, their drawings they'd gifted her leaky roof. But her freedom? She bit her lip, shaking her head. I'm not sure. I need time. David nodded, standing. I'll wait. But think about those who will lose everything if the company falls. 2 days later, Sophie appeared at David's office, holding a latte. All right, honey, you win, she said, half joking, half serious. I'll sign the marriage contract. 1 year, $1 million. I want to fix my place and save the orphanage. But I have conditions. David raised an eyebrow. What conditions? Sophie pointed at him, grinning. You have to smile at least once a week. A real from-the-heart smile. If not, I'll plaster sticky notes all over your house and blast pop music 24/7. David stared, unable to believe he was agreeing. Fine, I'll try. Sophie grabbed a pen, signing the contract with a flourish. Sophie Blackwood. Sounds fancy. Okay, sweetheart, when do I move in? How many pairs of shoes can I bring? David sighed, feeling like he just signed a deal with a hurricane. Tomorrow, and don't call me honey here. Sophie did a little hop, winking. No promises. Get ready, hubby, 'cause I'm about to shake up your life. She left the office, leaving David both exasperated and curious about the woman about to change his world. News of the marriage kept spreading. Page 6 described Sophie as the free-spirited Californian who tamed the cold CEO. Shareholders sent congratulations, pleased with David's stable image. The stock ticked upward, and Park from Hantech emailed his congratulations, eager to see the wonderful couple again. David stared at the marriage contract, wondering how he'd survive living with Sophie, the woman who never stopped talking, laughing, or being unserious. But deep down, he was curious. Sophie had saved the contract and now the company. Could she do something even more unexpected? David Blackwood stood in the center of his penthouse on the top floor of a high-rise in Manhattan's Upper East Side, his piercing gaze sweeping over a space that was once as pristine as a work of art. The 3,200-square-foot apartment was designed with minimalist elegance, glossy oak floors, luxurious gray leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing New York's skyline. Everything was spotless, perfectly in place, reflecting his disciplined nature, until Sophie Bennett stormed into his life. In just 1 week since signing their marriage contract, his fake wife had turned his sanctuary into a chaotic battlefield. David clenched his fists, staring at a swarm of pink sticky notes plastered across the fridge, each scrawled with her messy handwriting. Buy yogurt, honey, or pizza tonight. I'm craving it. Sophie, David called, his low, sharp voice echoing through the quiet space. No response, only a high-pitched, off-key voice belting out from the master bathroom where Sophie was performing her shower karaoke. I want to dance with somebody. Oh, I want to feel the heat with somebody. Her tone, mixed with the sound of running water, was so full of energy it made David rub his temples, feeling a headache brewing. He marched to the bathroom door and knocked hard. Sophie, keep it down. I'm trying to work. The singing stopped, and Sophie poked her head out, wet hair dripping, wrapped in a towel, her smile as bright as a California sunrise. Oh, sweetheart, jealous 'cause I sing better than you? Join me. I'll teach you to dance under the shower. She winked, water droplets rolling down her cheek. David glared, struggling to maintain his icy composure. I don't dance. And stop calling me sweetheart in this house. Get out here now. We need to talk about the mess you've made. Sophie shrugged, grinning. Okay, chill, honey. 5 more minutes. Let me finish the chorus. She shut the door, singing even louder, as if deliberately taunting him. David gritted his teeth and returned to the kitchen, where the situation was worse. A gray cat, which Sophie had named Taco, was curled up on the counter, where he usually brewed his morning coffee. She brought a cat into my house, David muttered, incredulous. He'd been clear. No pets, no mess, no loud music. But Sophie seemed to have a knack for breaking every rule he set. 5 minutes later, Sophie emerged in cat-printed pajamas, her hair still damp, and flopped onto David's expensive leather sofa. "All right, sweetheart, what's up? Oh, have you tried the cookies I made? They're in the jar on the table." She pointed, oblivious to David's glare at the cookie crumbs scattered on the floor. David crossed his arms, his voice stern. "Sophie, we have rules. This apartment is my workspace and sanctuary. No cats, no sticky notes, no loud singing. You've wrecked everything in 1 week." Sophie tilted her head, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Oh, honey, you're way too stressed. Look, Taco's super cute. The notes help you remember stuff. And singing, it cheers you up. Have you tried singing with me? I bet you know, Sweet Caroline." She laughed, clapping like an excited kid. David rubbed his temples, feeling like he was talking to a tornado. "I don't sing, and I don't need notes reminding me to buy pizza. Clean up this mess, or you'll what? Divorce me?" Sophie cut in, winking. "1-year contract, remember? Plus, you haven't smiled this week. I'm waiting for a real one, honey." David clenched his jaw, unable to believe he was stuck with this woman. "Sophie, I'm serious. Get the cat off the counter, take down the notes, and stop singing." Sophie stood, feigning a dramatic sigh. Fine, I'll clean a little. But admit it, Taco makes this place cozier. You're too cold. You need some California vibes." She skipped to the kitchen, scooped up Taco, and kissed the cat's head. "See, Taco, Daddy's a bit grumpy, but you'll win him over." David shook his head, unsure whether to evict the cat or Sophie herself. But deep down, he couldn't deny that the apartment, chaotic as it was, felt less empty. The following days, their fake married life unfolded as a series of laughable clashes. David, with his 5 a.m. routine of brewing espresso with second-by-second precision, lost it when he found Sophie's half-finished coffee cup on the table, complete with a sticky note. "Your coffee's awesome, but next time add caramel syrup, pulse." He tore down the note, only to find the fridge covered in new ones the next day. "Get vanilla ice cream, honey." Or "Movie night, I'm picking a rom-com." One morning, David opened the fridge for milk, only to find a tiny cat figurine inside, accompanied by a note. "Taco told me to leave his cat buddy here to surprise you. Love ya." David slammed the fridge shut, shouting, "Sophie, this is too much." Sophie ran out from the living room, wearing a hoodie, giggling. "Oh my gosh, you saw the cat buddy? Isn't it adorable? I had it custom made to distress you." She clapped, thrilled as if she'd done something monumental. David pointed at her, his voice shaking with frustration. "You put a figurine in my fridge. You think this is a game? I have a shareholder meeting this afternoon, and I don't need plastic cats disrupting me." Sophie tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, sweetheart, you need to chill. Hey, I can help with your meeting. I make killer PowerPoint slides. Want to see?" She grabbed her tablet, opening a file bursting with colors and cat stickers. David sighed, at a loss for how to handle her. "No, thank you. Just clean up the notes and get the cat off the counter." Sophie shrugged, grinning. "Okay, but you owe me a smile this week, or I'm sticking notes on your laptop." She darted off, leaving David exasperated and helpless. One evening, David returned home late from a grueling shareholder meeting. He stepped into the penthouse, craving quiet, only to be greeted by blaring pop music from the living room. Sophie was dancing with Taco in her arms, singing along to Uptown Funk through a Bluetooth speaker. The living room furniture was rearranged, cookie crumbs littered the coffee table, and sticky notes covered the TV. "Welcome home, honey. Dance with me." David froze, tempted to hurl the speaker out the window. "Sophie, turn that music off. Is this a nightclub?" Sophie paused, shutting off the speaker, but her smile didn't fade. "Oh, sweetheart, you're back. You look stressed. Bad meeting? Sit down, I made cookies for you." She tugged him onto the sofa, shoving a cookie into his hand. David stared at the cookie, then at Sophie, speechless. You never stop, do you?" Sophie plopped down beside him, shrugging. "Nope, 'cause if I stop, you'll drown in your serious world. Try the cookie. I'm a baking pro." She grinned, her eyes sparkling. David reluctantly took a bite, and to his surprise, the cookie was delicious. He looked at Sophie, stroking Taco, and a small, genuine smile crept onto his face. Sophie clapped, cheering. "Oh my gosh, you smiled. Week's quota met. Okay, I'll spare you one day without notes." David shook his head, but he couldn't deny that this chaotic moment made him feel lighter. Sophie, with all her mess and noise, was slowly seeping into his life. Their life continued with humorous clashes. Sophie sneaked another cat into the house named Burrito, sending David into a panic when he found cat hair on the sofa. She left notes everywhere, from the bedroom door, "Yawn less, honey," to David's printer. "Print this for me. Love ya." David, though driven up the wall, started getting used to her presence. Once he caught Sophie softly singing to Taco in the kitchen, and though he hated to admit it, the scene was endearing. Sophie never stopped teasing him. She changed his phone's ringtone to Baby Shark, nearly making him chuck the device when it went off during a meeting. She stuck cat stickers on his laptop, and when he noticed, she just laughed. "To make you less serious, sweetheart." Despite his frustration, David began to see Sophie wasn't just a storm. She brought life to his sterile penthouse, and every time she laughed, called him honey, or left a silly note, he felt a corner of his heart, the part he'd locked away long ago, start to stir. Rain fell in a gray drizzle outside David Blackwood's penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side. The usually quiet apartment now echoed with heavy, rasping coughs from the master bedroom. David lay in bed, his face pale, forehead dotted with sweat. The man who controlled everything was now at the mercy of a fever that left him too weak to sit up. His private doctor had visited, prescribed medication, and ordered rest. But David stubbornly propped open his laptop, trembling hands checking emails. "I don't have time to be sick," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Sophie Bennett, in a cat-printed hoodie, stood at the bedroom door, arms crossed, watching him. "Oh my gosh, honey, you're stubborn as a rock. The doctor said rest and you're planning a Zoom meeting? Hand over the laptop." She marched over, snatched the computer from his hands, and set it on the table. David glared at her, though his eyes were weak. "Sophie, stay out of this. I have to handle a new contract." Sophie shrugged, her mischievous smile unwavering. "The contract can wait, but you're about to pass out. Stay put, I've got this." She spun around, darting to the kitchen, leaving David lying there, both annoyed and helpless. In the kitchen, Sophie rummaged through cabinets, searching for ingredients. She wasn't a skilled cook, but she remembered the porridge her mother made whenever she was sick. "Okay, I can do this," she mumbled, humming a pop song. She clumsily sliced ginger, dropping bits of scallion, but pressed on with determination. An hour later, she returned to the bedroom with a steaming bowl of porridge, its ginger aroma filling the air. "Ta-da! Sophie's magical porridge! Eat up, sweetheart, or I'll feed you myself." David eyed the bowl, then Sophie, his gaze skeptical. "You made this? Is it edible?" Sophie feigned offense, hands on her hips. "Excuse me, insulting my cooking skills? Try it, I swear you'll love it." She sat on the edge of the bed, scooped a spoonful of porridge, blew it cool, and held it to his mouth. "Open wide like a kid." David, though reluctant, opened his mouth. The warm, simple porridge, bursting with flavor, surprised him. He swallowed, feeling the chill in his body ease. "Not bad," he mumbled, his tone less sharp. Sophie clapped, her smile radiant. "See? I'm a genius. Now finish it, and I'll tell you a story." She pulled a chair closer, grabbed her phone, and opened a fairy tale file. "Okay, today we're reading Cinderella. Don't say you don't like it. I know you secretly love these stories." David frowned, about to protest, but the fever sapped his strength. He lay back, listening as Sophie read in a clear, animated voice. She embellished the tale, using a shrill voice for the stepmother and a deep one for the prince, turning the story into a lively performance. And the prince said, "You are my light." "So cheesy, but cute, right, honey?" Sophie laughed, glancing at David. David, despite trying to stay stoic, cracked a faint smile. Sophie's laughter, her silly storytelling, and her earnest care stirred a strange warmth in him. For the first time in years since his betrayal, he felt genuine care from a woman. He watched Sophie, engrossed in her tale, and couldn't look away. She was chaotic, loud, but something about her made his long frozen heart begin to thaw. When Sophie finished, she noticed David had fallen asleep, his breathing steady. She smiled, gently tucking the blanket around him. "Sleep well, sweetheart. Don't get sick again," she whispered, leaving the room. In his dreams, David still heard her laughter, and for the first time, it didn't annoy him. From that day, David began to change. He no longer grimaced when Sophie laughed loudly or sang off-key in the kitchen. He found himself watching her, even in fleeting moments, when she petted Taco the cat, stuck notes on the fridge, or danced in the living room. Her laughter, once maddening, now felt like a melody he didn't want to stop hearing. Sophie, oblivious to his shift, continued her antics. One evening, she caught David staring as she scribbled a note. "Taco says hi, honey," she grinned, tossing him a pen. "Want to write one? Bet you'd say, 'Meeting at 8, don't be late.'" David shook his head but smiled. A real one, meeting her weekly quota. At a charity gala for Hantek's partnership, Sophie shone, charming executives with her wit while holding David's arm. When a reporter asked about their whirlwind romance, she spun a tale of taco dates and rooftop stargazing, making David chuckle despite himself. Later, as they danced, she whispered, "See, Kuk Kung, I'm making you fun." For once, he didn't correct her nickname. Back home, David found a note on his laptop. "You smiled twice today. Proud of you, sweetheart." He stared at it, then at Sophie, humming in the kitchen. His heart stirred again, and he wondered if this fake marriage was becoming something more. To him, at least. The penthouse of David Blackwood, perched on the top floor of a high-rise in Manhattan's Upper East Side, bathed in the soft golden light of a Saturday afternoon. The space, typically serene, hummed with the faint beat of pop music from Sophie Bennett's Bluetooth speaker. Sprawled on the gray leather sofa in an oversized cat-printed t-shirt, Sophie swung her legs to the rhythm, scrolling through Instagram. David sat at the dining table, reviewing financial reports on his laptop, his sharp blue eyes focused. Despite months of living together under their marriage contract, their differences remained stark. David, disciplined and cold. Sophie, chaotic and talkative, always managing to both irritate and captivate him. Suddenly, Sophie's phone buzzed. She answered with a radiant smile, her voice as bright as a California sunrise. "Yo, Jake. Oh my gosh, it's been forever. What's up, you goof?" Her clear, energetic tone echoed through the living room. David glanced up from his laptop, silent, but his eyes darkened. Sophie continued, laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha, you're still calling me sunshine? So cheesy. Yeah, I'm free. Dinner tonight? Cool, that burger joint in Brooklyn, 7 p.m. See ya." She hung up, turning to David with a wide grin. "Sweetheart, I'm heading out tonight. Jake, an old college buddy, invited me to eat. Haven't seen him in ages. He's hilarious." David snapped his laptop shut, his voice icy. "You're my wife on paper. You can't go gallivanting with other men." Sophie blinked, then burst out laughing, sitting up on the sofa. "Oh my gosh, are you jealous, sweetheart?" "Jake's just a friend, harmless as our cat Taco. Besides, the contract doesn't ban me from eating with friends, right?" She tilted her head, her twinkling eyes daring him to react. David clenched his fists, a surge of irritation flaring in his chest. He didn't understand why he was so upset. This was just a contract, not a real marriage. But that nickname, Sunshine, Sophie's cheerful tone with this guy, made him want to punch a wall. "I'm not jealous," he snapped, his voice stiff. "But you can't let the media catch you with another man. It'll ruin our married image and jeopardize the Hantek contract." Sophie stood, sauntering over with a teasing smirk. "Oh, that's a solid excuse, but I bet you're totally jealous. Look at your face, like you're about to toss someone out a window." She poked his chest playfully, her voice light. "Admit it, honey. You don't want me having dinner with Jake, do you?" David met her gaze, his eyes stormy. He wanted to deny it, to maintain his cool facade, but the emotions roiling inside him were undeniable. Still, he took a deep breath, forcing calm. "I'm only concerned about the company's image. If you want to go, go, but be careful. Don't let paparazzi snap any photos." Sophie raised an eyebrow, surprised he didn't push back harder. Her smile softened. "Okay, I'll be careful. No photos, I promise. I don't want to mess up your contract anyway." She returned to the sofa, texting Jake. but a hint of disappointment flickered in her eyes. She'd hoped David would admit to jealousy, even a little. David watched her, the unease still simmering. He told himself this was just business, that Sophie was free to see friends. But as she stood, heading to her room to get ready, he couldn't focus on his reports. The word sunshine echoed in his mind, and the thought of Sophie laughing with that guy made him grip his pen tighter. That evening, Sophie arrived at a cozy burger joint in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The place buzzed with laughter and the savory aroma of grilled patties. Jake, a tall guy with curly hair and a friendly smile, stood and hugged her as she walked in. "Sunshine, man, you're still the same ray of light from college." Jake laughed, pulling out a chair for her. Sophie grinned, sitting down. "Ha ha, you're as corny as ever. Spill, how's life? Still doing those indie film projects?" She propped her chin on her hand, her eyes sparkling, completely at ease with her old friend. Meanwhile, David, dressed in a dark suit and a low-brimmed cap, sat in a dimly lit corner of the restaurant, pretending to read news on his phone. He'd followed Sophie quietly, telling himself he was just ensuring no paparazzi caught her. But when he saw Jake call her sunshine and hug her, his blood boiled. He gripped his phone, eyes locked on them. Sophie and Jake chatted animatedly, laughing as they reminisced about college days. Jake shared a story about their outdoor sleepover party, while Sophie recalled how Jake's impersonations of movie characters had her in stitches. Mid-meal, Jake casually put a hand on Sophie's shoulder, pulling her closer to show her a photo on his phone. "Check this out, sunshine. That time you graffitied the professor's whiteboard. You're a legend." Sophie laughed so hard she nearly choked, oblivious to Jake's friendly gesture. But David, from his corner, saw it like a stab to the chest. He stood ready to storm over, but stopped himself. This wasn't his business. Sophie wasn't his real wife. Yet he couldn't leave. He sat back down, watching, his heart heavy. As dinner ended, Sophie hugged Jake goodbye, promising to catch up soon. She left the restaurant, took a cab back to the penthouse and stepped inside, her mood buoyant. But she froze when she saw David standing by the door, his eyes dark, arms crossed. The dim living room light cast shadows on his face, highlighting a mix of coldness and tension. "Sweetheart, why aren't you asleep?" Sophie asked, her voice cheerful but tinged with surprise. She shrugged off her jacket, hanging it up. "I'm back on time. No paparazzi. I checked." David didn't answer. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her. "You had fun, didn't you? Laughing with that guy, letting him call you sunshine, letting him touch you." His voice was low, laced with suppressed emotion. Sophie blinked, then burst out laughing, realizing what was happening. "Oh my gosh, you're actually jealous. I knew it. Jake's just a friend. He's always been like that. Did you follow me, honey? That's adorable." She stepped closer, about to poke his chest as usual, but David didn't let her continue. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her into his arms, one hand gripping her waist, the other cradling her neck. Without a word, he leaned down and kissed her fiercely, pouring every pent-up emotion into the kiss. It was intense, passionate, leaving Sophie stunned. Her eyes widened, heart pounding, but she closed them, kissing him back, her hands instinctively clutching his shirt. When they parted, both were breathless. Sophie's face flushed, her usual confidence replaced by rare flusteredness. "Whoa, sweetheart, what was that? You just kissed me? Like, for real?" She stammered, her voice shaky, trying to laugh off her embarrassment. David turned away, hiding his own fluster. He didn't know why he'd done it. "Don't make me say it again," he said, his voice hoarse. "Don't see that guy anymore." He walked to his bedroom, shutting the door, leaving Sophie standing there, her heart still racing. Sophie touched her lips, her face burning. She wanted to tease him like always, to barge in and demand answers. But this time, words failed her. David's kiss had shattered her quick-witted defenses. She muttered, "Mr. Iceberg can kiss like that. Damn, I'm in trouble." She turned, practically sprinting to her room, closing the door, trying to calm down but unable to stop replaying the moment. From that day, the penthouse's atmosphere shifted. David remained stoic, but when Sophie called him honey or flashed her radiant smile, he no longer glared. Instead, he watched her longer, his eyes complex. Sophie, though trying to stay carefree, blushed whenever he stood close. She canceled all plans with Jake, not out of fear of David, but because she realized she didn't want to upset him. Yet neither mentioned the kiss, as if it were a secret they weren't ready to face. In quiet moments, Sophie wondered if David felt something real or if it was a fleeting reaction. David, though he wouldn't admit it, knew his once frozen heart was beating for this loud, radiant woman who shone like sunshine. Time passed like a fleeting breeze, and the one-year marriage contract between David Blackwood and Sophie Bennett reached its final days. The penthouse on the top floor of a high-rise in Manhattan's Upper East Side, once cold and orderly, now bore Sophie's mark everywhere. Pink, sticky notes plastered on the fridge, Taco's cat hair scattered on the leather sofa, and her bright laughter echoing every morning. But as the contract's end loomed, a heavy tension settled between them, as if they stood at a crossroads neither wanted to face. David had changed. He grew distant, avoiding Sophie's eyes, giving curt replies to her questions, and staying late at the office. He told himself this was the best way to free her, to let her return to the carefree life she loved. He didn't want to admit it, but the thought of Sophie leaving pierced his heart. He had fallen in love with her radiant smile, her playful, honey nicknames, the warmth she brought to his life. But he believed she deserved better than a cold man like him. Sophie, meanwhile, maintained her usual carefree facade. She still stuck notes around the house. "Get vanilla ice cream, sweetheart," sang off-key in the kitchen and teased David when he frowned. But behind her smile, she was breaking. Each night, when David wasn't looking, she sat in her room, hugging Taco, silently crying. She had fallen for him, for the stoic man who was tender in unexpected moments, for his rare smiles sparked by her, for the fierce kiss he gave her when jealous over Jake. But David's growing distance made her fear he didn't want her to stay. She told herself to be strong, to pretend it was just a contract, but her heart wouldn't listen. A week before the divorce papers were to be signed, Sophie tried to talk to David in the living room. He was reading reports, eyes glued to his laptop. "Honey, contract's up next week. Planning a farewell party? I'm thinking pizza and dancing to Taylor Swift." She grinned, her tone playful, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of sadness. David didn't look up. "Do whatever you want," he said, his voice icy. "After next week, you're free." Sophie bit her lip, forcing a smile. "Yeah, free. Sounds cool, right?" She turned, hurrying to the kitchen, pretending to look for snacks, but really hiding the tears welling up. David watched her go, his hand clenching, wanting to follow but lacking the courage. The day to sign the divorce papers arrived. They sat across from each other in a lawyer's office in central Manhattan, the air stifling despite sunlight streaming through the glass windows. Sophie, in a cat-printed t-shirt and jeans, tried to act nonchalant, doodling on a scrap of paper, but her hand trembled slightly. David, in a flawless black suit, stared at the divorce papers before him, his grip tight on the pen, his eyes dark. The lawyer, a polite middle-aged man named Mr. Thompson, slid the papers toward them. "Just sign here and it's done. Ms. Bennett, you'll receive the $1 million as agreed, and the contract ends." Sophie looked at the papers, forcing a weak smile. "Okay, sweetheart, sign this, and I'm free, right? Will you miss me? Who'll stick notes for you now?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were sad, as if clinging to something fleeting. David didn't answer immediately. He looked at the papers, then at Sophie, the woman who had changed his life. He remembered her cooking porridge when he was sick, singing off-key in the kitchen, scattering silly notes around the house. He recalled her smile, her honey calls, the kiss he gave her when jealous over her friend. He didn't want her to leave. The thought of a penthouse without Sophie suffocated him. Sophie picked up the pen, signing her name with a flourish, but her hand shook, smudging the ink slightly. She pushed the papers toward David, her smile strained. "Your turn, honey. Sign and we're done." David stared at her signature, his heart constricting. He couldn't do this. Without another thought, he stood abruptly, snatching the divorce papers from the table. Under the stunned gazes of Sophie and Mr. Thompson, he strode to the decorative fireplace in the corner and tossed the papers into the flames. They caught fire, turning to ash in seconds. Sophie's jaw dropped, and she leapt up. "David, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" David didn't answer. He moved toward her like a storm, one hand wrapping around her waist, the other cradling her neck, pulling her into a fierce kiss. It was intense, raw, as if he were pouring out every suppressed fear of losing her. Sophie froze, eyes wide, but then closed them, kissing him back, her hands clutching his jacket, tears streaming down her cheeks. When they parted, both were breathless. Sophie looked at him, shocked and emotional. "Honey, what was that? The papers, the kiss. What's happening?" Her voice trembled, trying to laugh through her tears. David met her eyes, his voice hoarse but resolute. "I don't want a divorce. I don't want you to leave. Sophie, I love you. I love your smile, your laugh, the way you drive me crazy. I can't live without you." Sophie blinked, tears falling faster, but a radiant smile broke through. She pinched his cheek, her voice choked. "Oh my gosh, sweetheart, you finally said it. I thought I'd wait another year. Do you know how much I cried because you were so cold, you idiot?" She laughed through her tears, throwing herself into his arms. David held her tightly, feeling complete relief for the first time. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and whispered in her ear, "I'm sorry, honey. From now on, I'll smile every day, as long as you're with me." Sophie laughed, hugging him tighter. "Deal, but you're letting me keep the sticky notes, or I'll start a riot." She winked, and they both burst out laughing, oblivious to Mr. Thompson standing there, awkwardly watching. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, scratching his head. "So, I assume no divorce papers needed. I'll prepare new documents if you require." David and Sophie looked at each other, laughing louder. Sophie, still clinging to David, turned to the lawyer. "Thanks, Mr. Thompson, but we're good. Now I'm taking my husband home for pizza to celebrate." She tugged David out of the office, hand in hand, leaving the lawyer bemused but chuckling. As they stepped onto Manhattan streets, sunlight pouring down, Sophie looked up at David, her smile dazzling. "Honey, you know, I think I'll call you that forever." David shook his head, but his smile didn't fade. From a contract, he had found the sunshine of his life. Sophie, the woman who made his heart beat again. The penthouse of David Blackwood in Manhattan's Upper East Side glowed with the soft golden light of late autumn. Once meticulously orderly, the space now bore Sophie Bennett's chaotic touch. Pink, sticky notes plastered across the fridge, Taco's cat hair scattered on the sofa, and the warm aroma of freshly baked cookies wafting from the kitchen. The one-year marriage contract had ended, but David's impulsive act of burning the divorce papers and kissing Sophie fiercely had changed everything. Yet he hadn't formally expressed his true feelings, and Sophie, though she stayed, still awaited his confirmation. That afternoon, Sophie was in the kitchen, wearing a cat-printed hoodie, singing an off-key rendition of Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. She fussed over a tray of cookies, attaching sticky notes to each. "For honey, eat lots." David stood at the kitchen door, watching her, his heart pounding. He loved her, her radiant smile, her tuneless singing, the way she made his life vibrant. But he, a man who controlled everything, felt like a nervous schoolboy facing these emotions. David cleared his throat, stepping into the kitchen. "Sophie, we need to talk." Sophie spun around, flour on her hands, grinning widely. "Oh, sweetheart, you're all serious. What's up? Cookies before or after the talk?" She held up a cookie, winking. David crossed his arms, trying to maintain his cool facade, but his eyes softened. I need to talk about us, about what happened in the lawyer's office." Sophie stopped singing, set the cookie down, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "You mean when you torched the divorce papers and kissed me like we were in a Hollywood movie?" "Okay, I'm all ears. Spill, honey." She put her hands on her hips, facing him. David took a deep breath, searching for words, but his emotions surged like a tidal wave. He wasn't good at discussing feelings. He was used to numbers, contracts, plans. But looking at Sophie, with her messy hair and dazzling smile, he knew he couldn't stay silent. "Sophie, I thought a contract was all I needed, he began, his voice low and slightly shaky. I thought I could control everything, that you were just part of a plan. I was wrong. I need you to breathe, to laugh, to live. You've changed everything, and I love you. Sophie blinked, her mouth dropping open, then burst into laughter, her eyes glistening with tears. Oh my gosh, sweetheart, was that a love confession? So clumsy but adorable. She stepped closer, poking his chest. So, what now? Hiring me for life? David met her gaze, his eyes darkening with resolve. He grabbed her hand, pulling her close, his voice hoarse. Not hiring, proposing. Before Sophie could react, he dropped to one knee in the middle of the kitchen, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a sparkling diamond ring, simple yet elegant, perfectly Sophie's style. Sophie covered her mouth, tears streaming, but her smile never faltered. David, you're serious? You're proposing? In the kitchen? With sticky notes and cookie crumbs everywhere? She laughed through her tears, both stunned and moved. David smiled, a rare, genuine smile. I'm not good at romantic gestures, but I want you with me, not just for a year, but forever. Sophie Bennett, will you marry me? Sophie squealed, tackling him in a hug that nearly sent them crashing into the cookie tray. Yes, 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 oh my gosh, honey, I'll marry you, but you gotta let me keep the sticky notes. She laughed, pulling him up, kissing him fiercely. David kissed her back, holding her tightly, feeling like the world shrank to just them in the messy kitchen. The proposal, amid sticky notes and cookie crumbs, was perfect for Sophie and David. They stood there embracing, laughing like kids, oblivious to time. Sophie slipped on the ring, holding her hand up to admire it. So fancy, sweetheart. But next proposal, pick a romantic spot, like a beach. David shook his head, his smile unwavering. You want a beach? I'll give you an ocean. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead, feeling truly alive for the first time. They quickly planned a small, cozy wedding at a Brooklyn restaurant. Quintessentially Sophie. She wore a simple yet radiant wedding dress, still calling David honey in front of guests, making everyone roar with laughter. David, outwardly stoic, couldn't take his eyes off her, and during their vows he held her hand so tightly she whispered, Relax, sweetheart, I'm not running away. Post-wedding they became a real couple, wildly in love. Sophie remained her messy self, leaving cookie crumbs on the table, sticking notes everywhere, singing off-key every morning. David stayed cool on the outside, but at home with Sophie he was different. Tender, smiling often, even learning to pet Taco without grimacing. Together they funded the Queen's Orphanage where Sophie once volunteered. With Blackwood Enterprises' support, the orphanage was rebuilt, adding art classes, and the kids dubbed Sophie Miss Sunshine and David Mr. Honey, making him both embarrassed and reluctantly amused. One day Sophie brought home another cat named Burrito, prompting a sigh from David, but no protest. Turning this place into a zoo? He asked, yet petted the cat when Sophie wasn't looking. Meanwhile, they prepared to welcome a new family member, a baby on the way. Sophie eagerly decorated the nursery with cat-themed wallpaper, while David quietly assembled the crib, his eyes soft as he watched her. One morning, Sophie opened the fridge, finding an unusual note. Not her scrawled handwriting, but David's sharp script. I bought a contract. I got a lifetime. She laughed, rushing to hug him from behind. Honey, you're getting sappy. I love you. David turned, kissing her, and they stood in the note-filled kitchen, knowing they'd found true happiness. 40 years later, David and Sophie, now in their twilight years, sat together on the porch of their Malibu home, watching a fiery Pacific sunset. David's hair was silver, but his blue eyes remained sharp. Sophie, with wrinkles, still glowed like sunshine. They held hands. They reflected on their 40-year marriage, filled with memories, arguments over Sophie's sticky notes, nights David stayed up tending to their kids, volunteer trips to the orphanage. They'd raised 2 children, now grown with families of their own. Blackwood Enterprises thrived, but David always said his greatest success was Sophie. Honey, regret marrying me? I'm pretty messy, Sophie teased, resting her head on his shoulder. David smiled, a tender smile reserved for her. Never. I'd marry you again, even with a million sticky notes. He kissed her hair, and Sophie laughed, her laugh as bright as ever. They sat hand in hand, watching the sunset, knowing their love, sparked by a contract, would forever light their way. Inside on the fridge, an old note remained, David's words from 40 years ago. I bought a contract. I got a lifetime.